Philadelphia, so we hope John's here. I want to welcome everybody to this meeting. It's we're getting to the real exciting part of these discussions. I would like to welcome also Mayor-elect Colin Reed, who is joining the council officially today, and who will, of course, after the first of the year, take over as co-chair. Welcome, Colin. Glad you're here. We also are missing one of our representatives from the Department of State, Andy Labruzzo, who's been with us for countless projects over countless years. Really has provided an awful lot of assistance to the Department of State. Barbara and I were just talking a few minutes ago. Department of State really does get to help a lot. Andy's been involved in so many projects, I don't know that I could name them all. In my tenure, most notably the local waterfront revitalization plan and this effort, although others. I was kind of hoping he'd be here so we could say thank you to him. I hope you'll extend that to him when you get back. I want to do that. And so let's get into the meeting right away.
Takeaways from our previous meetings with the local planning committee and talking about some of what we're hearing in our public engagement through a variety of different forums. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how we've generated the project list that we'll be reviewing later on today. As well as how we start to think about what could define a catalytic project. There are a variety of criteria that we're going to want to evaluate potential projects against. One of those is how catalytic they are based on the economic and physical circumstances that we're seeing in Plattsburgh. We thought it'd be helpful to review some of the conditions there. We're then going to break, the local planning committee is then going to break out into 3 groups to start to talk through, for about an hour, a fairly long list of potential projects that have been generated via past plans, our conversations to date, as well as public conversations. Members of the public are welcome to stay and witness that. By sort of sitting around the planning committee tables. We will be having an identical conversation tomorrow that really gives members of the public an opportunity to be at the table and talk about those projects as well. The LPC will then come back to debrief on its conversations from the breakout groups, and we'll have a few minutes for public comment at the tail end of the meeting. So, as a reminder where we are, this is the 3rd meeting of the local planning committee for Plattsburgh's downtown revitalization initiative. We also had our first public meeting on November 10th, and we'll be having our second one tomorrow. We will be coming back after this meeting and tomorrow's discussion of what priority projects might include to talk about a somewhat shorter list in greater detail so that you can formalize recommendations as to what should be funded for DRI, as well as what should go within the final strategic investment plan. And then we'll come back in February to really talk about what that overall strategic investment plan looks like. Before we recap the DRI and sort of what we've talked about in past meetings, Margaret, can I invite you up here to speak a little bit about the conversations that we've had the opportunity to have with members of the public?
Well, I think everybody knows that we started out by doing a public meeting on development building tomorrow, and we're hoping that we're about 45 people at the first meeting, and the conversation was really excellent. There were two movie nights, which had about 60 people between them, and sort of the key takeaways from that was about rehabilitating buildings, adding housing to downtown, offering more young people things to do, which my entire life is whenever I ever worked in work, kids were saved and but anyway, and expanding the co-op into a larger scale solutions that would be more needs. We've done a general survey and a survey of students at STIC. We have just about 200 surveys back complete, and they're really interesting. And I think one of the most interesting things is that the students and the residents see the downtown largely in the same way. However you move forward, there's a lot of potential in the county. And the key takeaways I'm going to talk about essentially restaurants and food and shops. And some of the comments we received were, it would be great if more businesses were open on Sundays. A few classier bars and options would be nice, perhaps another coffee shop or boutique. We'd like more interactive stuff, like art classes, painting, etc., that are held in the evening or weekend in the summertime. So really getting in and getting your hands dirty. Downtown pedestrian facilities aren't attractive enough to keep people interested and encourage shopping. That has to go where there may be a Gap, good stuff, and a Gap, and more good stuff, and people get distracted during the Gap. Would you mind pressing the button, please? Are there any things that keep you from going downtown? The weather, I'm sure we can do something about that. Too cold. Sidewalks, there was a lot of conversation about the physical infrastructure downtown. Sidewalks are in poor condition, it's not bike friendly, it's not clean, the roads are not well maintained, and there's not enough parking. So those are sort of things we typically find, but in general we got down to sort of parking and the theme, not enough restaurants. So more to do, more to do. But a good focus on sort of aesthetics and infrastructure. Downtown is not pedestrian friendly. There's zero lake access, and what you do see is overshadowed by the treatment plant. In winter, when you can't get from the car to the sidewalk because of the snow and concern from a number of people about really handicapped accessibility downtown. And I'd like to see even more small and locally owned businesses. No big box stores, no walking malls, small businesses supported during their startup phases. And what do you like best about downtown Plattsburgh? And Amy's going to add to this with what the young people we talked to today liked best. It's nice, outdoor options. These are the words that were used. Our vibe, it's cute, it's clean, it's a small town, it has a sense of history, it's walkable, fun, the lake, small businesses, bars, and restaurants. So the restaurant identity seems to be something that people are supportive of. Walkability was talked about by a number of people. Character and charm, fun to walk through. This is high schoolers as well as middle schoolers as well as all the rest of you. It's lively at times, but quiet when it needs to be. There's a balance. I love the energy and positivity and how accessible. It's fun and eclectic. And cafes, and people mentioned the murals and street art. And I think that's the last one of those, but so no more. So what businesses do you patronize? And just to not beat the dead horse about the food theme, but these are the businesses that people patronize. And you will see that virtually every one of them either is a restaurant or sells food. And apparently you have some extraordinary pizza available. And these were the student responses. So before we go back from that, the other group we met with were young people, and we did that this morning. And Amy and some fabulous teachers at your middle school. Last night we talked to some high schoolers, and then this morning to a large group of middle schoolers. You should know that it was probably the best turnout we've had in the meeting, so use that as your benchmark. And I don't think they were getting extra credit, were they? Maybe. But Amy's going to talk just really briefly about some of the things we heard, because it was absolutely great and empowering experience.
Well, first I should say it was really great that Sandra was able to attend, and they took a moment and recognized, because at least like 25% had been downtown for the parade and for the tree lighting. So it was great for her to get that feedback, and great to hear that they really love that stuff. It wasn't, it's not too hokey for 11-year-olds, then we're doing something great, and Sandra's doing a great job. So that was great. I thought we could start just with a quick quote that made me really proud. We spoke with a couple of seniors yesterday who are heading out to college, and one said, "Downtown's so important. I think Plattsburgh is a good one. If there's a good town, it's a good town. I feel comfortable. It's a comforting thing. You can find them all anywhere, everywhere, but downtown is comforting, and it's where the real people are. You can tell a lot about the town by who is downtown, and it's the personality of the town." And to hear, somebody who's heading out into the world brag about her hometown and to feel comfortable, and they all said for any kind of development, make sure that you're keeping what's already there. You know, when I come back in 10 years, I want to be able to see the coffee cat and other things, but keep that good vibe, and we like the quirky. Real quickly, natural beauty, people friendliness, gathering places, the library, restaurants, food, obviously a big theme. McDonough Monument comes up time and time again, no matter what age, as this really important special place, whether it's little kids running down the ramp or sledding or using it as a meeting spot for the fireworks or and its historic importance. People are very proud of that, and it's really a special spot. And everybody noted, not just because they're in social studies, that the history of our town is important. What they want, very quickly, affordable opportunities, recreation. They want paintball, water park, indoor climbing, adventure, trampoline park, and mini golf. So got that covered. We're set. They'd like more trails. They'd like trails to conductivity between downtown and the college, more natural spots, buskers, and money-making opportunities for them. Playgrounds. They like the pop-up idea, so nothing permanent, just a rotational thing would be fun. Shopping opportunities, museum, aquarium, zoo, underwater tourism, which I love the idea of. I thought that was the coolest thing to come out of the thing this morning. Did we mention it was 66 11-year-olds in one room coming up with this? A candy store, clothing store, more restaurants. So that's what they had to say.
Yeah, it was a load of fun, and the alignment between what older people and younger people say is a great opportunity. Just very quickly, so the first public meeting went very well, and I'll just tease out a few of the key themes that we have been talking about in past plans and prioritized. Prioritize lake access and riverfront access. Enhance pedestrian connectivity to the lake, to the river, and to other assets. Build an incubator and makerspace. Establish long-term public-private partnerships. Create an 18-hour downtown where people live, work, and play. Market the downtown with a cohesive identity. Improve connections to the train station and offer multiple modes. And there were many, many more. And the notes from that meeting will be made available to you as well. So we're really happy with the amount of feedback we've gotten today. We hope tomorrow is going to be a great big meeting, and that all of you can come, and that we will encourage everybody who can to come. So I appreciate it, and you all.
There are a couple of items that we wanted to follow up with you on based on the conversation at the last committee meeting. The first one was the vision statement, which will become part of the strategic investment plan and also needs to be really the frame or one of the, we want to make sure that all projects that are being recommended for DRI funding are consistent with this vision. We walked through a draft vision with the committee, which was really drawn directly from past work around the LWRP, but more targeted toward the downtown. The feedback we got in it was really twofold. One was that it was too long, that we needed something that was shorter, that could be translated into more of a marketing pitch. The other was that while it was too long, it was missing some key elements for consideration. So we've reframed the vision statement as follows. A shorter upfront tagline: the Downtown Revitalization Initiative will foster downtown Plattsburgh's educational, cultural, historic, we've added that, artistic, recreational, dining, and retail opportunities. And then some key supporting statements. The DRI investment will strengthen existing local and regional assets. Based on committee feedback last time, added that it will create long-term value to support future generations. And it will provide an inclusive and sustainable, important language identified last time, downtown experience for residents, workers, students, and visitors. So that's reflecting the feedback we got from the committee. We also went through this at the last public meeting and received some fairly similar feedback to what we heard from you. We can take any further comments on this at the tail end of the presentation if we want to go back and revisit that then. As a reminder, we also talked through a series of opportunities and challenges within the downtown and resulting goals that we want to ensure that investments through DRI are helping to achieve. One of those challenges was that there are major assets here that are disconnected, and I'll come back to that again. Therefore, it suggests the goal that we create a vibrant downtown that enhances the experiences of multiple audiences. We recognize that there is significant historic fabric downtown, but also a high degree of vacancy, suggesting that we provide diverse housing and shopping options to attract residents, support existing residents, attract additional visitors, and make it a great place for people to work as well. We also recognize that Plattsburgh is a regional economic center, but that there's a limited workforce downtown. The jobs are not located downtown, therefore those workers are not supporting retail and creating activity on the street to the extent that they could be. And so want to focus on attracting and retaining businesses and jobs that support economic development. And we had our conversation last time, also shared this with the public at the public meeting, spoke about a few specific objectives underneath it. There's some wordsmithing that we'll continue to do, but generally the goals seem to stand up in our conversations. You had a question?
The middle slide, historic fabric, but high vacancy. What is your definition of high vacancy? And does that pertain to the residential side of the market? Or the
It was primarily about retail, I believe.
I don't know if I'd agree with that. I don't
Okay.
think there's necessarily high, well,
Yeah.
high vacancy, high vacancy.
Right, right, it might be challenge market or underutilized, but. What is the vacancy?
I don't think we have a specific vacancy rate. It was more observations and conversations with people.
So it's not a specific, did you actually do a study on that or no? Or is it just a general?
We pulled our national resources as available using CoStar and things like that. Spoke to other LPC members and folks around the community. I don't believe we set a specific metric that determined that it was high vacancy, but we did hear a number of qualitative statements saying that there were some missing teeth in the smile of various street corridors and some vacancies that folks would like to see.
Yeah, it's a misnomer, I would agree with what you're saying. There's not a lot of empty storefronts.
Okay.
Okay.
It's more about lack of continuity and activation.
Or variety, or, yeah,
The retail mix.
right.
Okay. Thank you. While we're here, other comments on these or the revised vision statement? Just as a reminder, we have a major public meeting scheduled for tomorrow, and we'll have a third public meeting in February. We'll continue to look at opportunities for a broader engagement in parallel with this too. The next LPC meeting will be in January, but our priority for today is to start to prioritize an expanded and refined list of projects to recommend for DRI funding as well as strategic investment plan inclusion. And let's talk about how we've generated a list of projects. First of all, we've received some additional guidance from the state about what can qualify, at least for consideration for DRI funding. The definition is very broad, which is exciting. There are very few limits as to what can qualify. This is not that it has to be capitally eligible. Can be considered for real estate development or pre-development, public infrastructure investments, direct grants or revolving loan programs, commercial space improvements, mixed income housing, branding and marketing, business recruitment and workforce development, tourism development and promotion, arts and culture, historic preservation, capital improvements to community facilities, long-term planning studies, and specifically more policy-oriented studies, as well as feasibility studies. It doesn't necessarily have to be long-term. Organizational capacity building, and regulatory or zoning changes. So all of these items can be considered for DRI funding, as well as inclusion in the strategic investment plan.
Is there any percentage limits on any of those?
In percent, I don't believe so. I don't know if you mean what portion of the projects can fall into any category or what percentage of the funding comes from DRI. I don't believe that has been spelled out specifically. But certainly one of the ability of the DRI funds to leverage additional funds is one of the criteria that you're going to want to consider. And that is explicitly part of the state criteria for DRI funding. So when we sit down, we're going to be looking at a list of about 35 projects. How do we generate this list? We reviewed, it's around 36 different plans that have been generated by and within the city of Plattsburgh, as well as within the broader region, and took from those all of the proposed projects that had been identified. We supplemented that with projects that came out in the community conversations, as well as conversations with the LPC. In supplementing that, we also shrank it down by recognizing where you had the same project come up in multiple plans, it was really the same recommendation, or where projects had already been implemented, or where they were related enough that they could really be consolidated into a single project. And when we sit down and go through the list, we can specify or clarify how that was done. What we've done is generated a high-level evaluation of those the consultant team has, based on the four broad categories of criteria that the state has requested the local planning committee consider as it's evaluating potential projects for funding, and that the state will be using to review those recommendations. That includes impact, so alignment with DRI goals and existing plans, community benefits, economic and fiscal impact, employment and job growth, workforce development potential, and transformative potential, catalytic potential. It includes cost. What's the estimated project cost? What is the ability of the project to leverage additional outside public or private funding if some DRI funding is provided? Are there other funding sources that could be used instead of DRI funds that should be considered in determining whether or not they should be prioritized? Also, project feasibility. Is there market demand for it to actually make, for example, a development project sustainable? Is there site control or are there regulatory challenges that would impact implementation? Is the project ready to move forward? Either a study ready to move forward today, or could construction with some work be ready to move forward in the near term? And is it clear who is responsible for and has the capacity for implementation and maintenance? And there's actually a final category here too that's reflected in the more detailed evaluation that we'll be going through, which is financial and operational sustainability. If you were to fund this project today, would it still be there contributing to downtown Plattsburgh in 3 to 5 to 10 to 15 years? The final category, which we're not yet measuring, but is part of our conversation today and will be very much part of our conversation at the public meeting tomorrow, is the level of public support for the project. Now, it's important to recognize that while our focus today is really about which projects we want to prioritize for further evaluation for DRI funding, there are a range of projects that the state has requested you consider for inclusion in the strategic investment plan. That includes projects and initiatives for DRI funding, but also specifying projects and initiatives that could seek other funds through CFA or other state or federal resources. It's not a coincidence that the DRI process is scheduled to end at the end of February, which is when the next round of applications for CFA is also supposed to start. Congratulations. There are a couple of CFA awards that I know Plattsburgh received yesterday, including, I believe, a parking feasibility study for Durkee Street, design of a boathouse at Dock Street, and I think there may have been some others as well. So again, projects that aren't recommended for DRI funding this round could be considered for future CFA funding as well. Projects that you believe are important and should be considered for public funding in the future but aren't quite ready to go need to be further fleshed out. Local actions that the planning committee and the public believe should be advanced and supported but don't necessarily require public funding. Private sector opportunities that complement projects funded through DRI but don't in themselves require public funding. And other public sector opportunities or actions, again, more policy-oriented, that are really independent of any public or state funding. All of those, as we're looking through this list of potential projects, can be considered for inclusion in the plan, even if you don't recommend them for DRI funding specifically. So, one last thing we wanted to talk about before we break out into groups and start going through this project list. One of the criteria here is how catalytic will a project be for revitalization of downtown Plattsburgh. And so we wanted to very briefly revisit some of the physical conditions that we reviewed in our past meetings with the LPC. First, is that we recognize that Plattsburgh's downtown is home to major assets. You've got the waterfront, you've got the riverfront, you've got the historic downtown, you've also got historic residential neighborhoods, you've got great open spaces, but they're fairly disconnected. Now you've got most of your existing attractions largely in the historic downtown. That's about a 15-minute walk from the waterfront. Now 15 minutes is not a huge walk depending on what the weather is, but that experience and how long that walk feels depends very much on what the public environment is in that connection and what one sees along the way. So the downtown, which in itself could still use further strengthening, as Margaret was describing, we heard a lot about how people wanted to see additional dining options, that there is a sense that there's discontiguous retail within the downtown itself, is even further away from the waterfront. And it's not just distance, it's the fact that you've got a wastewater treatment plant between you and the waterfront. You've also got train tracks that impede access at certain times. The riverfront itself is actually much closer, of course, but there's also limited access to the riverfront too. So even those assets that are really close to each other are fairly discontiguous. The other key consideration is that the market is still growing here, that you're operating in, it's not a boom market in Plattsburgh. There's the ability in certain locations to achieve high rents, but overall within the downtown, you're not attracting terribly high rents right now. And so while you have some key sites for catalytic investment, Durkee Street, Dock Street, the municipal lighting storage facility, each of those are major potential development sites. Part of the consideration has to be how do you keep building the market to attract development for those as well. And finally, one of the things that we've recognized in our conversations with you and our conversations with others is that there are a lot of organizations who are and institutions who are focused on Plattsburgh, who are focused on the region. There's no clear entity, though, that wakes up every day and says, what's happening in downtown Plattsburgh, that has the mandate and the capacity to think about the range of issues that you've identified as potential priorities: housing, programming, marketing, clean and safe, employment. Each of those is covered by different entities within the area to varying degrees, but not necessarily with a specific focus on downtown. And so one of the criteria as we described for evaluating potential programs is whether there's an organization, there's an institution with the capacity and mandate to actually take that on. That's going to be something we need to think carefully about. Two final considerations. $10 million is a significant amount of money. It also doesn't go that far as you're talking about capital projects. So this is this amount of money that could, achieve a couple fairly large projects that potentially, if it's also coupled with other sources of funds, or lots of small projects. And you're going to want to think about how do you make sure that that investment is being consolidated so it has a significant impact in the area that it's targeting. And also look for opportunities for DRI to leverage other funding sources as well, so that $10 million is generating much more for downtown Plattsburgh. All of these conditions start to point to 4 strategic implementation strategies that we have started to frame the projects list that we'll be going through according to. One is the need to strengthen the core. The historic downtown, which again, doesn't yet have contiguous retail along all corridors. We've heard a lot about the challenges of the pedestrian experience, not enough downtown attractions. How do we strengthen the experience there and increase its desirability for residents, visitors, and workers? Then how do you build the market overall by making it easier for those who want to invest, those who want to develop, to access the market, making it more enticing for them to come to Plattsburgh specifically? How do you prepare for catalytic investment? So there's sort of the broader market support and growth, but then there's also looking at specific sites that could be the target for catalytic investment. How do you pave the way so that when the market is ready to go, those can advance? And then finally, focusing on growing capacity for implementation. Any projects hitting any of those 3 areas need to have an entity positioned to advance them. One of the questions that we received in our last meeting was whether there were good precedents that we would point to that might be inspiration for Plattsburgh. So before we describe what we're going to do in the breakout groups, Connor's going to walk through a few precedents for inspiration that can kind of get our juices going here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The four categories that we're talking about, the four case studies that we're talking about today, are organized around the four implementation themes that Kate just mentioned. The first being Schenectady, New York, then moving on to some interesting ways that Montreal has enlivened some retail corridors, looking at downtown capacity for catalytic investment along the waterfront in Buffalo, and then finally, a cohesive branding strategy for Salem, Massachusetts. So in Schenectady, this is a story about how physical improvements for walkability can help to generate increased foot traffic, and that those aesthetic improvements support local businesses and help attract interest in downtown from residents and developers that can create new projects, renovation of existing assets, and attract broader investment from the outside community. So looking at how traffic calming measures can complement the historic fabric, contribute to the downtown feel, and alleviate some safety concerns. So the ways that those were implemented in downtown Schenectady, initially there is an organization that was created in the late 70s, around 1977, as a not-for-profit 501c3 called the Downtown Schenectady Improvement Corporation. This originally was just a parking entity, but in the early 2000s was empowered with broader ability to work on clean and safe streets, visual improvements, and marketing and business development. The way this organization is funded is through a downtown special assessment district, so that the businesses in that area pay a small fee on top of their property taxes. So that's one annual assessment. They also receives an annual operating grant from the County Development Authority, and then fundraising from special events and other sorts of outside grants and fundraising. Looking at the city of Montreal, a city that faces similar cold weather challenges with keeping its downtown vibrant and active, and along the implementation strategy of building the market, providing things for tourists and visitors and residents to do. So this is a story about creating temporary design interventions and how those can support local businesses and small businesses and contribute to downtown beautification. So looking at how they have reclaimed, underutilized, or poorly planned spaces in front of their restaurants and bars with some temporary and low-cost interventions that promote local ownership and allow residents to have some beautiful sidewalk cafes in a way that contributes to the broader environment. So the way that this was enacted was as a pilot project in 2006 by City Action. It maintains local control by the various precincts throughout the city, and the restaurants have to pay a permit in order to have this benefit of taking the public space. The cost of the permit is based on the size of the restaurant and whether or not any metered parking is removed from that asset there. And this was a pilot project in 2006. In 5 years, it expanded to more than 100 restaurants utilizing public space for these bollards and temporary patios. There are very strict rules and regulations regarding what types of materials can be used for these patios, and it must be clearly delineated by wooden railings, and must be built atop a platform that is wheelchair accessible, and must be surrounded by flowers or greenery or other assets like that. So ways that the city can create a mechanism to promote the better utilization of public assets. Looking at Buffalo, New York, under the theme of preparing for catalytic projects along the waterfront, the canal side development is an example in the most recent years of a very successful large-scale catalytic investment along a very industrial and working waterfront. So looking at how mixed-use projects on the waterfront can help to act as a draw, can provide resources for residents and tourists to come to the area from the region and broader, looking at supporting the identity and branding of the neighborhood and celebrating natural resources in a way that Plattsburgh residents have certainly spoken to us about what they'd like to do along their waterfront. So this was created by an agreement through the state. A new authority was created, the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, but was funded through the New York Power Authority that gave the state a 50-year license to draw energy from Niagara Falls in exchange for a $7 million annual fund to help support this entity. The entity has broad powers of real estate control, zoning, I believe some taxation, TIF, tax incremented financing abilities as well, and that the creation of that paired with a very robust public dollar figure has enabled just an incredibly catalytic project to come online in the most recent years, and has spurred additional development around that area with some office buildings that had been vacant for 20 years now being renovated into hotels and law firms with their tenants. And of course, the Harbor Center hockey-themed mixed-use development with the Buffalo Sabres right along the waterfront as well. And our final case study looking at Salem, Massachusetts, and an entity called Destination Salem. Salem is a town and a community very much like Plattsburgh with some unique local history, but faced a challenge of how to cohesively message and coordinate their marketing and provide tools for small businesses to leverage that marketing. So this was looking at investments in signage and wayfinding to break down barriers between different districts throughout the neighborhoods and create a unified brand for the entire community. The way that this entity is funded, Destination Salem, is in part direct funding from the city, but also they create an annual publication that is funded by advertisements from the local businesses to provide revenue for the marketing entity going forward. So that was a lot of information, and we have a lot to cover as well. So what we will be doing is breaking out into a couple groups. We provided to the planning committee a day or two ago, but we also have printouts for everyone as well, a very large table, about 10 pages or so, of the 35 or so projects. They are organized across a series of evaluation criteria. We have about a dozen evaluation criteria, and this is the consultants team's first cut at providing a high-level evaluation across a wide variety of projects and projects that are at various stages of their development and their ability to put shovels in the ground. So the criteria that we're talking about today are organized, as Kate had mentioned, in a couple different ways. There is impact, there's cost, there's feasibility, and there's public support. Within impact, we have a rating of catalytic potential, the ability to get other things going, community, economic, and fiscal benefits, so what are the actual cost-benefit analysis, what sort of things will result from these projects, financial and operational sustainability. In cost, we've broken this out into study cost and implementation cost, along with the ability to leverage public funding and the necessity of DRI funding acting as that last dollar for this project. And finally, in feasibility, as Kate had mentioned, we have site control and regulatory challenges, readiness and timeline, clarity, capacity of a responsible entity to implement this investment, market demand and economic feasibility, and then public support. So we welcome your feedback on this first cut of an analysis. Paul?
When you finish, I've got 3 questions before we push on.
Sure. So our goal for what we are hoping for in this next hour or so is to, we'll have some discussion questions teed up on how we'd like to talk about all these projects, but our goal is to reduce this list of about 35 projects into a smaller number of 10, 15, hopefully no more than 20, that the consultant team can then spend some time performing a bit more in-depth analysis to come back to you in January for further prioritization. Let's see here. We have groups that we've split you out into. Kate will be taking group 1 over that table over there. Myself will be group 2 over in the middle, and Margaret will be with group 3 at the end. What we'd like is for the groups to start at this list of 35 projects at a different group to make sure that all of the groups talk about all of the projects. We don't want to get caught up on the first couple and then not make it through the entire list. And so the questions that we will be discussing, we'll walk through very quickly all of the projects on the list. We'll just talk about them in a very quick manner. But then for the majority of the time, we'll be asking these questions of what are your reactions to these high-level evaluations? Should this be priority for DRI funding? What should we prioritize a study? Should we prioritize actually implementing this project, or both? Should this be a priority for including in the strategic plan, but maybe not providing some of that DRI bucket of funds to, but looking for other public sources or private or nonprofit sources to go towards these projects? And then, are there anything that we should be focusing on or amending to our project descriptions to make sure that we're studying it from the right perspective? And so this exercise, as Kate mentioned, is for the local planning committee. The public's, of course, welcome to stay and watch and listen, but the primary opportunity for the public to provide feedback on these projects is tomorrow during our public meeting. But at the end of this meeting, we will have a brief opportunity for any comments as well. Paul, you had some questions.
When you talk about employment downtown, what type of employment are you referring to?
We're referring to all employment. In what context do you mean? Just anytime that we in our presentations?
I don't see, a 150-person employer downtown.
Right,
I see
absolutely.
Very small, so they're just talking about more of the same type of employment downtown? Is that what people are referring to when they talk about employment downtown?
The value of getting employment downtown is that you have more workers who are coming downtown every day to support retail. In terms of new employment opportunities and projects, they've been primarily focused on incubator space for startups, food-related, there are a couple projects related to that. We're not, and one of the key challenges that we identified early on is that the large-scale employers are looking for a footprint that's probably bigger than is readily accessible within the downtown market. But certainly anything that's going to generate jobs within downtown Plattsburgh is going to get more people here. So, downtown as well as the broader region always has this challenge of what is the employment base that you're trying to leverage and grow, and what is the market for that? And as we look at some of these project options, we can delve into those questions a little bit more specifically.
The second is there's been a fair amount of talk about public-private partnerships, but I really haven't seen anything about how we go about developing those public-private partnerships, which sort of links to the third question. How are we going to evaluate whether, the total is greater than the sum of the parts? Each of these individually can be very good projects, but when you link them together, how are we going to evaluate whether or not it's going to achieve what we hope it's going to achieve?
Excellent questions. On the public-private partnerships, there are a handful of projects that are included in this list that are prime opportunities for public-private partnership. And if these are identified as, again, we've got to get this list a little bit shorter for us to really roll up our sleeves and advance it, are identified as priorities, we can delve further into between now and January. How would you actually advance that? And how might DRI funds help accomplish that? The other question was about, how do you determine sort of whether the whole is, whether the sum is
Whatever it is.
that. We have maps on the table, and part of it is also from a physical standpoint, sort of how do these all relate to each other? We have maps on the table that start to show where these individual projects are concentrated. The considerations are sort of how long the corridor, for example, might this impact, or are the variety of projects increasing the critical mass of activity in one particular place? It's as much art as it is science, and I think it will really come out in our conversations as we think about how these relate to each other. And we'll continue to have that conversation as we get into a shorter list of projects in greater detail come January.
Thank you.
Where are we with the Chazen and Camoin, the market analysis on Derby Street, and how might that inform what's happening here? Because I feel like that would be a pretty big tool.
So we received, Paul, do you want to describe it?
That was actually just finished up coming out, but they have received the initial draft and you guys will as well.
So can that help us make, it seems like, I don't know what's in it, but it seems like that might be a useful tool as we start narrowing, because what might be a great idea might not be so good in that report.
So we're reviewing the report. The report identified, I believe, $1 million gap in terms of project feasibility. However, it didn't look at parking. And so one of the things to consider is, and I can't remember if it actually looked at parking creation for the project, but it's $1 million to make it work for the vertical development. You also have to think about, though, how are you replacing those 300 parking spaces? Now, the CFA funds were just approved to actually do a parking study to help you figure that out. If this project is sort of rising to the top of things people really want to figure out how to advance, we can work between now and January to try and map out what is the process and time frame by which you might figure out what the parking strategy is, therefore what the total funding is to get this done, and then start to put together a public-private partnership. And that may or may not, probably can add to that, work for DRI, but it's also something that can be represented in the plan.
I started, Paul sent me the report yesterday. Sorry, you guys, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but he wanted to let us know that it was ready. And I started to look at it yesterday. It has a lot of data and analysis, the market analysis, that I think would be helpful just in general for the DRI. I don't know if that was part of your question, but.
Yeah, I don't know what the content is, but something like that could help inform, you know, if we've got two great ideas and we're trying to pare down, and clearly it's coming out, and you guys have looked at this stuff too, to what's viable. I mean, I know that those 11-year-olds want a water park, but, you know, I don't know if it's gonna come out as a viable financial piece.
Talks about housing and retail, and it has a lot of information, so I always kind of send that to them.
Sorry.
Some weekend reading.
Other questions before we go to breakout groups? Okay. So these are the groups. Mayor, Keith, Rodney, Kim, Christie. Table number one.
It's the right table.
Lee, Jeremiah, Paul, Victoria, Mary, Neil, Amy, at the table. And again, that have been identified in number 3, to just streetscape improvements downtown, to be determined and identified exactly where those need to be situated. The Clinton and Margaret Street right now is identified. And pairing that with improvements to the Jersey barriers that currently set apart the on-street dining. A circulation master plan, a relatively low cost but high impact study that can take place. A big focus on events and programming as an opportunity to build the market by getting people downtown. Investing in upper floor residential, this was something that everybody thought could be useful but required some more study to really understand what's the nature of the problem. Is it really vacancy? What are the financial implications of actually owners doing those renovations on their own? And how do we think about affordable housing in those contexts as well? Revamping number 14, which was about investing in retail rehabilitation, making this more about retail recruitment and attraction, identifying specific retail to target and make sure that we're making it viable for them to be here. Number 15, revamping the public transit and SUNY access to focus on providing an open air trolley that can be part of both circulation but be an attraction in its own right. And it seems like this could be something that could be done in conjunction with the county at a fairly low cost. Do I have that accurate? Okay. Emphasis on downtown Wi-Fi is something that it sounds like there's already been some study of this, and for in the range of $30,000, providing free Wi-Fi downtown could be accomplished very easily. Combining numbers 21 and 30 to focus on building capacity overall, but in particular with an emphasis on workforce development. Number 25, advancing a public-private development strategy for the Durkee Street lot that will require some further study to flesh out what that means, but making sure that that's included here. And then a consolidation of numbers 7, 26, 27, 28, and 29, updating the master plan for the waterfront and to come up with a redevelopment strategy for the Durkee Street lot, advancing shielding of the wastewater treatment plant, figuring out what you're doing with the lighting storage site, and providing secondary access to the waterfront in the event that there is a train blockage and emergency, and looking at waterfront connections and pedestrian access there as well. So a lot of these sort of physical planning and redevelopment projects.
So we'll keep
along
5
the
million or
waterfront.
10 million available after that study's done, and you know exactly what that is.
So we got to, that's 11. Next.
We also came up with 11 through a series of combinations and other focuses. Our group talked about the need to have to focus on a catalytic thing to happen, and then backfill with other smaller things that could potentially be going there. Our group focused a lot on the wastewater treatment plant, ways that you can either in the near term mitigate those costs that have already been identified through the previous study, or think in a much broader and larger perspective of how do you tie the mitigation efforts of the wastewater treatment plant to the municipal lighting facility site and also the Dock Street site. So thinking holistically, master plan perspective for the waterfront, think about ways that either you fund directly through DRI or you leverage DRI funding to attract a large scale private investment that if they were to do the wastewater treatment plant mitigation efforts, could they get some access to site control for other things. We also talked about the need for pedestrian improvements throughout downtown and increased walkability issues, establishing the downtown historic arts district and branding in combination sort of with 10 events and programming there. 6, the Jersey bollards, the enhanced sidewalk dining bollards, and low-cost ways to enhance the vibrancy of downtown and get people there. We sort of combined 12, 13, and 14, which would be the loan financing programs for
a lot to keep digesting before we come back in January. I'm hopeful that we will see as many of you as possible at the public meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock at SUNY. But before we break, any questions from the public?
I wouldn't be doing my job well enough if I didn't inform you all of the students presenting their conceptual designs for the Fox Street Arena area. Wednesday the 14th here at City Hall, 4 p.m. We have a room call. The downstairs in the chamber area. Okay. I normally would be a little reticent because I do best work. They really did a bang up job, and I hope that you come and we really close to my best. It's an environmental practice assessment. And as I'm listening to some of the conversation you guys are having, I'm seeing lots of red flags and all the things that they have talked about for that site and have come up with some pretty clever strategies for dealing. Yep, I'll send out information for sure.
Standard Dawson Lane.
Yeah, where the bridge is going through the plan, and we're in the whole area.
What time?
4 o'clock.
I'll send it.
No, it's a different group. They did your thing with the
So another class looked at a similar kind of activity.
I'll send out both. I have the presentations from the students, the Durkin Street, and I'll send out the time if you guys are interested in joining us next week.
I'd like to ask for a 2 minutes discussion, having a public process meeting in January in conjunction with our committee. We've got one in November, December, February. We've had the committee meetings, but I think every opportunity to roll this stuff out to the public is really, really important.
We are open to it.
So if it's not a meeting, at least put it in the paper or something, or, we were talking, I forget who I was talking with, I think him. And a lot of times at public forum, people are nervous to get up and say what, in front of people. They have some other way for them to have input besides speaking publicly.
I second what Colin's saying, just, it doesn't have to be a large gathering where people up on stage and talk. We love our sections. There's just so much collective knowledge that we should tackle on the whole road to the end of February.
I think before we leave, I'd just like to, I know it's his last meeting, but to thank Jim. I think without Jim Calnon's leadership in making this a focus for his staff, we wouldn't be here today. And quite frankly, if Jim hadn't retired, I wouldn't be here today.
So we'll talk further about public opportunities come January, and we will look forward to seeing you first tomorrow, and then in January. We expect that we'll be reaching out to a lot of you quite a bit between now and then as we're working to flesh out these projects for more detailed discussion then too. So don't have too restful a holiday.